Welcome to Workshop Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and today joining me is my beautiful wife.
Hi.
That's how you always start that way.
It's because I'm uncomfortable.
It's good to know. So today's going to be a bit of a short episode, I think. We are quite busy, shall we say?
Mm.
Those who follow along on my social media will probably know that we recently sold the shop and our house, and we're going to start building a new house in the very near future. And everything went much faster than we were anticipating. So today we were at the lawyer and signing paperwork, and of course our real estate agent made a mistake.
Because they're having a mild heart attack.
Yeah, made a mistake when they sent the conveyancing documents. So the shop is being sold separate from the house, and at different closing dates, but the closing dates were the same on both documents, which were much sooner than anticipated
For the house.
which
Not ready for that.
gave everybody a panic attack for a moment, wondering that we'd missed something. But anyway, we've had a number of conversations today that I thought maybe we'd kind of recap and go over about disabilities.
In full disclosure, by recap you mean you're going to remind me of what we talked about, because for me to go back and think about it, I can't. I can't bring it back.
Pretty much, yes.
So disabilities.
Yeah, disabilities. As we were talking about disabilities and about visible and versus invisible disabilities. You know, people with Down syndrome, for example. I had a brother with Down syndrome, and that's a very visible disability. You know, for the most part, you can spot somebody with Down syndrome and go, yes, they have Down syndrome, and here are some of the things that they deal with. Problems like autism may or may not be visible or ADHD.
Because there's like hyperactive ADHD and there's inattentive ADHD, and the inattentive is what we deal with our son, and it's not visible. In fact, most people think that he's what a great calm kid because he's off in his own little world.
Yeah. But there's a lot of...
Not that he isn't great. He's amazing.
He's the best son we have.
He is the best son we have.
Sometimes he's the worst son we have too, but
he's awesome. He's an awesome kid.
Anyway, one of the things we talked about was this idea of people's perception of disabilities and people's perception of problems that they may have often dictates how they approach and respond to the problem. People often have a very black or white perception of a potential problem, or of a mental disability or a disorder or a physical disability, and they go, I have a problem, therefore I can't, or that person has a problem, therefore they can't, and so they either give up on doing the thing, or they refuse to admit that they have the problem, right? And I don't know if you remember who Oscar Pistorius was or is. I think he still is.
No, I don't.
So back in the early 2000s, around 2010 is when I first became aware of Oscar Pistorius, and he's a bilateral amputee in his feet, and he holds a number of running records, speed records, because he has these funky cheetah blades or something like that is I think what they're
Oh,
called.
yeah. I remember.
Do you remember him?
Yeah.
Of course, we won't actually talk about Oscar Pistorius because it turns out that he also murdered somebody, and
Oh, great.
yeah.
Fantastic.
But the point
This
was
took a dark turn.
yeah. The point is though that
There is a point, right?
yes.
Okay.
The point is that he's faster than me, and
And
I
kills people.
also, which I don't do.
Can't let it go now.
Good job. Anyway, he's faster than me, despite the fact him not having feet. Okay, you can stop laughing.
Horrible mental image. We need to move on. Continue.
So somebody without feet can potentially be faster than me, even though I have feet.
Catch
So
you
even
and kill you. Can't. Continue. Keep
most footless amputees I can probably outrun if they're trying to kill me.
going.
But
Not Oscar.
but not Oscar Pistorius.
Okay.
The point is that it doesn't matter the fact that he may be faster than me and he may try to kill me or not. The fact that he's fast does not negate the fact that he is missing his feet. And so you can have people who have a disability that may be 100% functional. You may not know, but that doesn't change the fact that they have that problem and they are dealing with that. And so I think the takeaway for me from our conversation throughout this day today is number one, don't, hang out with people who are amputees because they also might be murderers.
That's all I'm taking away today.
That's my wife's takeaway anyway. but the point of a disability or understanding that if you have a problem like ADHD or autism or an auditory processing disorder, learning disorders, dyslexia, any number of these things that can be perceived as challenges aren't reasons why you can't.
No, and I think there's a real misconception about well, you're getting at least the way that we grew up, it was, well, she's getting along fine. She doesn't need a diagnosis. And I don't think that's true. I think a diagnosis gives peace of mind. It stops some of the voices in your head. And I think that that's something that we've also discussed this week with our son. Since getting diagnosed, we were like, are we just noticing things more? Like some of his, what is it called? Stemming.
Yeah, his behavioral things that he does
have maybe been a little bit more pronounced. And on the flip side of that, I also think that he's coping better.
Yeah, because he's
allowing himself to do those things and not feeling weird or uncomfortable. And he will tell me, he's like, I just need a minute. And he'll flap his hands and do his little thing, and then we're done and we can move on. And whereas before, I think there was a lot of pressure to be like, no, you can't do that. And especially when he was in public school, you can't do that. That's not socially acceptable. And are there things that are stemming things that are not socially acceptable? Sure. But
nothing he was doing.
Flapping his hands back and forth when he gets really excited, or really overwhelmed or whatever. And with the move, there's a lot of feelings and anxiety and things that have come up, and just seeing him come into his own and regulate himself has helped me. If that makes sense. Like just seeing that, and I'm proud of him. I'm proud of him for doing that and for not feeling uncomfortable about that, for saying no, he didn't want to go to an activity with friends because it was something that he would not feel comfortable with doing, and he wasn't upset by it. And I think previously he would have been. He would have been upset that they were doing the activity in the first place. Instead of like this time, we didn't have I'm not even realizing that until now. We didn't have to deal with that this week. It was he let it go pretty quick and moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of why it's really, I was just trying to remember why I was talking about this in the first place. But it's part of why it's important to get that diagnosis. Even if you're not severe or she's coping, he's coping. But you could be doing better. And when you have that and you can give yourself the grace and the acceptance and you can find then strategies because you know for sure what it is, you're not just guessing. It's not like you're walking around in the dark anymore. And I think that's what I've seen in him.
Yeah. To some extent, it's a little bit of knowledge is power, right? Like
Yeah.
you once you've uh, once you know you've left neutral ground, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're on neutral ground, you're stuck in the middle and you're not progressing one way or the other. You know, your head's in the sand or whatever metaphor you want to use. But once you know, then you can take control of what your future looks like.
Yeah.
And
Well,
like you can,
and I think as parents, it helps us to help with that with him because we know and we have some sort of guidance to which direction and to give him some more help and to, um, yeah, not feel so lost.
yeah, to if you don't have a diagnosis or if you don't know, then there's the constant background pressure of maybe I'm just weird. I should be trying to fit in. I should try to do these things. When and then once you go down the road of learning about yourself and getting those diagnoses that may make a change for you, then you can take control of the path forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm occasionally on this podcast or on my social media, I repeat the phrase, people can act or they can be acted upon. And as long as you're as long as you don't have the knowledge about something that you're potentially trying to figure out, then you are putting yourself in the category of being acted upon instead of the category of acting.
And I think that's part of that diagnosis helps you to know who you are and allow you to act, to move forward, to accept those things as a, not that like it's an unchangeable thing, but if you're an amputee, you're always going to be an amputee. You can find workarounds, you can find ways to help you do what you need to do. And it's the same with finding out you have autism or dyslexia or Tourette syndrome or ADHD. There are things that can help. You are always going to struggle with those things. But that doesn't mean you're lost. And it doesn't mean you can't do what you want to do. You just have to find the way that's going to work for you. And I think that's the big thing with realizing that these are largely spectrum disorders that we are dealing with our son, and let's face it, with ourselves. That as you find what part of that spectrum you fall into, it allows you to accept the things that aren't hurting you, that aren't hurting anyone else, that are allowing your body and your mind to clear itself, to act in a way that's going to allow you to move forward and to stop being stuck in neutral or feel like you're rolling backwards. And I think we've seen that in his, really in the last month, his academics have changed. There's been a change in his, what he's been doing, what he's willing to do.
And what he's self-motivated to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would recommend, and just putting this out here, if you have a kid you're worried about, get an assessment done. There is no shame in it. If they're getting by, great. There's still no shame in being like, hey, you're getting by, but this can help you do better. If you're driving a car and you're making it on 3 wheels with the one shooting sparks out, great. But if you could put another wheel on, it would probably work better.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing. Not that I think that we've even come to the point where we've made tons of changes, except that we know at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, not even kids. If you have concerns about yourself, even,
Should probably take that to heart.
probably the more you know, the better off you are.
It's true.
Yeah, and taking it to a broader perspective as well. It's not just mental disorders either. It's recognizing everybody is on a spectrum.
And everybody has something they're dealing with
Yeah,
that you can't see. And often they can't see either.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where last week's episode with Earl, he talked about giving people grace.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And understanding that, everybody has a challenge. And everybody's challenge is a little bit different. And I think that, that's the takeaway for me, is recognizing that you have a challenge. I have a challenge. Everybody gets a challenge.
Okay, so I saw this video today, and I don't know why it's coming up for me now, but I feel like I have to tell you. It was this girl, and she said, you know how they pretend to be the same person? Like, there's the girl, and she pretends to be your boyfriend sitting on the couch or whatever it is.
Sure.
Anyhow, so she's telling herself, but it's really a different person, and that means absolutely nothing because it's a video, except that I replay things exactly as a video in my head, so I have to tell you that. And she says, I feel fat. And then so he says, well, what do you mean? Are you feeling bloated? Are you feeling this? Because fat isn't an actual feeling. Well, no, I don't feel like that. And she goes, and then he's like, okay, well, do you feel like you've gained weight recently? He went through like a couple of different scenarios, and then he gets to like, are you feeling uncomfortable with your body? Are you feeling, and it kind of came around to that, oh yeah, well, some friends have texted me pictures, and we're going on a beach vacation in a couple weeks, and they've texted me pictures of them in their new bathing suits, and I feel uncomfortable with how I look in a bathing suit compared to them. So it's not that she actually was feeling fat, and feeling fat wasn't an actual thing, but the comparison to other people was causing her discomfort.
Uh-huh.
And I think that applies to like mental health conditions. It applies to the feeling fat condition. It applies to the feeling like we're not where we wanted to be in our life right now condition. Lots of those things that we say, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling stressed. Okay, but if you can take that and break it down and look at what am I actually feeling? Where is this actually stemming from? The same as, okay, you are not performing in school, you are struggling at work, you are not maintaining friendships. What's actually going on?
I don't like people. That's why.
Yeah, it's a mental health condition. Do you know what I mean though?
Yeah.
It's seeing that root cause, and that's where I feel like that's that change in that generational trauma switch. When you can start to see those things and you can start to progress.
Mm. Yeah, and that's where I've been studying up on Carl Rogers. If you know who he is, you probably don't.
I really hope he's not another Oscar.
No, Carl Rogers is not a murderer.
Excellent.
He's not an amputee either.
Not a murdering amputee. We've moved ahead. Yay.
Yep. I've moved ahead from the murdering amputee. Maybe you haven't, apparently. But anyway, Carl Rogers, he's a psychologist, and he's the kind of the founding father of person-centered therapy. And one of his core beliefs was that people have a natural drive to be psychologically well.
Mm-hmm.
And when they feel unwell, they have some sort of dissonance going on in their life. There's something that's not congruent with what their perceptions of what should be happening is. And often, to your point, they don't necessarily know what it is.
Yeah.
And so that's his view on therapy in particular, is that the person is the expert on their life, and as a therapist you just are there as their sounding board and to help them discover whatever that cause is.
Mm-hmm.
And don't know where I was going with that now.
I can't help you.
You should be able to
I
help
hear
me.
an actual train going by, so my train has left its tracks.
Yeah. Anyway, so Carl Rogers, his person-centered therapy, and this idea of oh, now I remember where I was going. um
Do you?
yes,
Okay.
I was trying to figure out the exact word and then you interrupted me. Thank you.
I'm quiet.
No, you're not. Anyway, so the thing is that if you if you're feeling uncomfortable about something, whether it's your body image, your skill level, your creativity, your mental health, your attention, whatever it is, if you're feeling uncomfortable about it, there's an opportunity there for you to figure out what is making you uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can change that. And now you may be a bilateral amputee who murders people.
Oh, good grief. I finally started to letting that go, and now I've got the picture back in my head.
Or you may not have a problem at all. And it may be just a temporary thing of recognizing, oh yeah, I'm just jealous that so-and-so looks better in a bikini than me. I would look terrible in a bikini.
That's a lot of hair. Also a mental image I didn't need today.
Thank you. But the point is if you're recognizing and feeling uncomfortable about a problem, then it doesn't do any good to just sit and ignore it.
No.
You have to do something to move
Mm-hmm.
forward. And so that's how you end up taking control of your life.
But isn't that like a law of physics, right? An object is never actually still.
An object in motion stays in motion. An object at rest stays at rest.
Oh, but it's like you're either moving forward or backwards. You're never just going to sit
And
there.
yeah, the law of entropy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a system tends to decay unless there's an input of energy.
Yeah.
So
if you're not inputting, you're
falling apart.
Yeah.
So by ignoring a problem, you're just causing the problem to get worse. Anyway, hope that was inspiring.
Be afraid of amputees and murder people.
Be afraid of bilateral amputees who are faster than you.
For some reason, I have a picture of like a Ronald McDonald on those things in my head coming after me. I don't know why, but it won't go away, and it's very scary.
And on that note, this is where we should plug the whole better help thing. Get some therapy.
I have therapy. I had therapy yesterday.
Through BetterHelp.
Did.
And it's working. Not that you can tell by our conversation here.
No, but it is working. And to your point, having that third party to talk to, having somebody else to sound it off of, it does make a big difference. And not that you aren't a great sounding board and that we don't discuss and talk about things as a couple, because we do. But sometimes just having somebody else, you need that, and that mental clarity and headspace. And yeah, don't judge other people because you don't know what they're going through.
Yeah. And on that bombshell,
Don't judge yourself either.
I won't judge you, I promise.
I said yourself, not me.
So if you found anything from this episode to be helpful and you want to reinforce it for yourself, I'd like to invite you to share it with a friend in the next 24 hours. That'll help reinforce it in your mind and it'll help those around you, which is always a good thing. So thanks again for listening, and now I'd like to say thank you to all the amazing patrons of the Workshop Therapy podcast. You guys make the show possible. If you're finding the show helpful and you want to support it, there are a few tiers, including a simple $1 a month option to just say thanks. For $5 a month, you can get access to the patrons only feed that has a pre-show and a post-show, in addition to the regular podcast all in one feed. You all know that the good stuff happens after the official mics are off, right? If you can't support financially, I totally understand, but I'd love it if you left a 5-star review or told a friend about the podcast. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear that as well. Send it to questions@workshoptherapypodcast.com and I'll get it on the show. I want to say thank you to all the patrons of the Workshop Therapy podcast, but especially to the founding fathers, and they are Mr. Matthew Serio from Argiano Serio, Mr. Brad Harrison of Brad's Customs, Mr. Keith Drennan of Blackthorn Concepts, Mr. Eric Peterson of Overall Maker Works, Mr. Brandon Millichamp of Tectonic Creations, and the one and only the Grant Alexander. So a special thank you to the founding fathers, and thank you to everybody who supports and shares the Workshop Therapy podcast.